Lately I wish on down the sky. You want your finger at me, you don't know why. Now she waiting.
Hello everybody, my name is Shanth Enjeti and welcome to Shanth Enjeti Art. My wife always asks me why I have that countdown take so long. It's because it takes every bit of that countdown for me to get my head around the fact that I'm about to live stream. I hope you guys are doing well on this fine Saturday. I am working on my comic book right now that's going to be launching on Indiegogo soon. We're going to have advanced sign-up notices. Like and subscribe here if you want to be up to date on what's going on. So I thought I'd carve out some time in the middle of the day to do a little bit of a stream, show you where my work is, and touch base a little bit. For those of you guys who have not subscribed to my Instagram, it's Shanth at Shanth Enjeti Art. Go check that out. And I also wanted to say how excited I was to see, and it'll probably change as soon as I say this, that I was up to 500 subscribers. So thank you everybody who has been subscribing to the channel and checking out what I'm doing here. I appreciate it. So this right now is a page I started working on a couple of days ago, and I'm working into it with opaque watercolor and gouache, and you can kind of get a sense of what it's going to be. It's a down shot, and it's the first appearance of this character, although it's the second time I'm illustrating it, which is this giant hound that kind of takes the main character in and out of the spirit realm. So it's kind of a hound of hell, so to speak. And that is what this page is about. And it's a pretty intense perspective shot. It's a down shot, and you can kind of get a sense of, you know, the stairwell that they're coming out of. And then you can sort of see the character, you know, grabbing the female lead's hand and pulling her away as they're trying to escape from the situation. So I'm going in right now. I just sort of roughed in some of the figure anatomy. I'm not wild about it. It's a little bit lifeless at the moment. But it's just so I can kind of get a sense of where everything's going to be and get a feel for what I want to do next. And that's the thing about gouache that I think a lot of people misunderstand, is that gouache is an illustrator's medium. And it really does allow you to make changes. It's not nearly as, depending on how you use it, it needn't be as stressful as some people think watercolor is. You can always work opaque over it. You can change things. I think James Gurney's done a brilliant job of talking about the potential of gouache, casein, and some of those paints. So here you go. And so here's the main character. And I actually had a pretty cool week this week. One of an artist I admire and who I sort of actually got a chance to sort of pseudo meet via Instagram is an artist named Dan Fraga. And he's a amazing artist, illustrator, storyboard artist, and back in the day he did a comic book called Black Flag with a Todd McFarlane inked cover. Oh, you hear the sound in the background? The police, they're coming for me. With a Todd McFarlane cover, ink job on it, and so it was really brilliant. And I remember getting it back then. And then he's of course now doing a book as a part of Comicsgate with Ethan Van Sciver and all of those guys, and so he's got this character that's from Black Flag called Gorilla, but spelled like Gorilla Fighter. And I did a head sketch of it because I felt inspired to do so this week. And it was nice. He shared it on his Instagram, and I got a chance to kind of, you know, have other people see it who have not seen my work before. So a lot of appreciation. Much love to Dan Fraga. And his Instagram is at CouchDoodles. And actually, let me see if I can reach it right now, because I'm sure some of you guys have not seen it. So, nope. And I've got a lot of artwork kicking around right now. Nope. Nope. There it is. Here you go. So here is a look at the piece that I did for Dan Fraga. There you go. That's a little bit better. So it's a giant cigar-smoking, ball cap wearing, tech headgeared gorilla, and with a really I had a lot of fun illustrating the cigar. Let's see how close I can get that before it goes sideways. There we go. So there's the gorilla face, there's the cigar, and I love that it's purple, which is a ton of fun. And then there's the Black Flag logo that I put on the hat, almost like it's a insignia. So yeah, that was a lot of fun this week, and it's cool when you get to meet people who you've known about for a long time and work in fields that you're tangentially working in, and I'm sure we know a lot of people who've crossed paths with each other. So it was great. It was really cool to get a shout out from Dan, and a big fan of what he's doing right now. And so if you haven't backed Black Flag, go check it out. But yeah, I think that I've learned, for anyone who's purchased my art books and everything like that, those came as a direct result of the conversations that were happening with a lot of the CGers. And in particular, I found out about Ethan Van Sciver through our mutual love of The Last Jedi. And I say that tongue-in-cheek, so don't get excited if you like that movie. I'm sorry, I'm not a fan. But that's actually how I met Michael, my Star Trek fan film buddy and YouTube brother, and artist brother for that matter. And yeah, it's really fascinating how that whole thing shook out for a lot of us who are in about the same age demographic, watching a lot of the things that we love be destroyed. But at any rate, if it wasn't for seeing Ethan and seeing someone in my age demo who has a similar understanding of or view in terms of work and art and how things have been going for a lot of us, watching a lot of the beloved works of fiction and art that we like be joyously destroyed by people who have no respect for them. I wouldn't have launched my first Indiegogo book. I mean, the reason I did it on Indiegogo was because of learning about a lot of the stuff that had gone on in terms of keeping people out who were interested in just being able to make their own work. And so I started this whole project of doing these art books to kind of see, okay, well, what's out there, what's possible. And I saw Ethan and other people doing it, and I funded the 2 art books kind of with not attached or affiliated to anything other than my work and with Instagram. And the interesting thing about that is, and I'm very proud of that, honestly, is I set out to put my artwork online, see if there was an audience for it, and then once I did, my attitude was, okay, well, now I'm going to try to crowdfund a book. And I had no idea if it was going to fund. None. I mean, I know there's a lot of people from younger generations who maybe are accustomed to this new reality that we find ourselves in. But I had never crowdfunded a book before, and I had no knowledge of whether or not it would be successful. And so, with 2 art books in the bag, I started to really think about, particularly because I did some comic book stuff in book 2, I started to think about, well, what do I want to do going forward? Like, what kind of work do I want to do? And I started experimenting with comics because I thought, well, there's this... I love comics. I've been passionate about comics since, since 1983, or sooner, come to think of it. And so this has been a huge part of my life. It's not something I just sort of got interested in recently, and I've also self-published comics and been professionally published doing comic book work. But the big sort of moment for me anyway was learning about crowdfunding and successfully crowdfunding 2 art books, and getting the style that I have now, which is to say working in a painted fashion. So my hope is to help to be a part of this indie movement that's going on that I think is really important and that I've been supporting since the beginning. And probably, well, actually I should say I know there's a lot... Beginning is a relative term. But certainly since the first crowdfunding efforts, or at least the second ones, because again, I got into this through Ethan. But I was there when Cyberfrog was crowdfunding, and watching that whole thing happen was kind of amazing. And so, as time goes on, and as someone who's a fan of manga and comics and all of this kind of stuff, and frankly, I'm glad that it's now at least being acknowledged by some people that American comics sort of need to get it together and start producing stuff that's interesting and exciting and, compelling. That I want to be a part of that. I want to be and I've always sort of been a part of it with my fantasy work, but it's the same thing, painting and illustrating characters and creatures and stories that are aspirational and that, have a lot of really cool visuals. So when you see the stuff that I'm working on, and here I just grab a random, sort of page out of my book, you can kind of see, this is a very kind of up close view of what it's going to be. But this, if I can get this to focus here, see if it knows what that is. I love my phone. Come on. There you go. So you can sort of see what I'm doing with the characters here. Bat wings, detail, figure work, heroes. I mean, that's what it's about to me. Vampire hunting, books of the dead, all of the stuff that makes art for me compelling and interesting. And so that's what this book is going to be about. And to me, that's what being a part of any independent movement is. And I've always wanted to self-publish my own stuff. I just was doing it during a time when I first started self-publishing comics. It was either on my own or it was on, with Diamond, which is just financially impossible, in terms of the cut that they take and the printing costs. So I've been, one of those people who really loved comics and had loved making comics, but the way to get your work out there just wasn't there. And now I feel like there's this amazing opportunity for people with skill, passion, drive, and the discipline to do it, to contribute. And that's what I want to do. I want to contribute to what's going on with comics, with Comicsgate, with the indie scene right now, because I think it's really an important thing. I think it's really an important scene right now. Because if we don't take advantage of the fact that we have these avenues for putting our work out there, I think we're going to regret it. It's the right to kind of put your stuff out there and, yes, collaborate with other people, but you really get to kind of, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, kind of, I don't want to say sink or swim on your own, but you get to actually own your success. And for a lot of artists and illustrators, my generation, this might be hard for some people who've grown up in the digital era to understand. But we sort of missed a lot of the new opportunities that happened. We came out during a weird time in between times, where the older generation, we were looking up and being told, hey, the older generation, you want to respect them so that when your time comes, you'll be given the respect and the deference that would come with your experience. And what we found is that once we got to that point where that was supposed to happen, then the generation above us was like, now it's time for it to be all about the younger generation. And we were like, but wait a second. We've just been working for decades to get to this point. And now you're telling us that thing that you expected us to give you, we need to give to somebody else now that it's our turn for it? That doesn't sound right. And unfortunately, I think that is something that cannot be overstated, how demoralizing that is. To do the work, put in the years, decades into a institutional, culture like comics or anything else for that matter, and then see the priorities. It's basically, seeing the fruits of your labor essentially being redistributed to people who didn't make them. And it's really tough to experience. And for a lot of people who might not see what we have in common with each other, those of us who are from all different walks of life, I think that's something that a lot of us have in common. We have in common that years and years of labor, and then seeing that stuff be disregarded and devalued. And that's what I relate to the most. What's the word I'm looking for? There's this Todd McFarlane quote that I love, and I've never, ever forgotten. I think it's just a brilliant quote. It was from a CNN show on Impact that I watched as a kid. There was a CNN show called Impact. And he said he was describing his time at Marvel Comics on Spider-Man. And he goes, the situation was this. You're trying to, no, the sales are in the tank on Spider-Man, so nobody cares what you're doing. They say, do whatever you want. And so you start working, and you're working away, and he does his Todd McFarlane sound effects. And at a certain point, all these people weren't on the train. And then the second that you get it to a successful point, everybody wants to be the engineer and take over and bring their ideas to it. Now, that's all fine and good. Or it's not all fine and good, I should say. But the problem with that is that why would people think that the person who did all of the work and the people who've been working at it for all this time, when no one was interested in it, are just going to happily step aside and say, oh yeah, go ahead, yeah, you be the engineer now. I was just here to kind of get this thing started. And so what I started to notice was the disrespect for creators who have had a disproportionately large impact on their industries being, assaulted by this barrage of, people tearing them down and saying, well, what have you done, for anything? It's like, no, actually the other question should be asked. And so I got into comics at a time when, and for the reason of, I love comics. Comics were something that I read and I can't overstate what a huge part of my life that they are. When someone asks me what my favorite comic book is, if someone says, hey, Shanth, what's your favorite comic? I don't say Spider-Man. I don't say Superman. I don't say Batman. If someone asks me what my favorite comic is as an American comic book fan, I tell people, Hulk 340. Hulk number 340. Wolverine versus Hulk. Written by Peter David. Todd McFarlane doing, I think, the inks over his own stuff for the first time on Hulk, if I'm not mistaken. I think he'd done some inks, but that was the first full issue. Those sirens are coming for me. I think it was Bob Wysek, I think it is, or Wycheck. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, who inked the cover. I could tell you everything about that book. I could tell you everything about Todd McFarlane's run on the Hulk. I was going to the store during the black and white craze. I was, fascinated by Tim Vigil's Grips. I was reading the first, and that was the name of the publisher, collected Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then trying to buy those single issues in black and white. That was, comics were everything to me. Following inkers, buying Wizard magazine, being a huge fan of and really excited about Image Comics and their creator-owned launch. And, I'd never really thought about things like that, but being into comics at that time was just a tremendous, huge deal. It was just a big deal for us to be into it. And so, I had my friends, we'd read comics, and talk about comics and reading X-Men and Extinction Agenda. And, when Rob Liefeld was, created Deadpool when I was reading New Mutants, and I got into New Mutants because of Rob Liefeld, and his style just jumped off the rack. I think the first issue I remember buying was the issue where Ron, or Wolfsbane, was cradling Warlock, who had just been killed and was sort of smoking on the cover. And it was such a powerful image. And then, of course, there were the issues I was also reading. So these may have predated that, but again, I can't remember. It's been a little bit of a time since I've looked at those issues individually. Was when Todd McFarlane was inking Rob Liefeld's covers for the first appearance of Cable. And so I got into all of that stuff, and I was just waiting for the latest issue of Comic Scene, Wizard magazine, Batman 1989. It was such a huge part of my culture, and I don't look back at it, interestingly enough. Even though those were fun times, I'm not interested in the nostalgia of it. It's not for nostalgia's sake that I'm interested in these things. The thing that I think about is just the artistry and understanding how amazing the work was that people were doing. The late Anton Furst, who died shortly after his work on Batman 1989 and his production design on the Batmobile, the Michael Keaton bat suit, all of the amazing work that came out. It was just beautiful work. And I want to create stuff that for fans of that time, but also for new fans, people who just want to, read comics by people who are trying to entertain them, who don't have contempt for the audience. That's what excites me the most about this. That's what excites me the most about this independent movement. And if anybody wants to do something in that movement, I would say, go out and do it. Go out and try it. There's a lot of thoughts and ideas about what things are like right now, and I honestly think that it's easy enough to find out about any of the, any art movement or any comic thing going on by just going into it. Make something good. Make something good. Make something inspiring and learn for yourself. The door is wide open. That was the thing that I really liked about, this is a pretty big gear shift here, but that was one of the things I always liked about Abraham Lincoln's philosophy, and also a lot of the founders' philosophies, which is, I have a strong belief that people should be able to rise as high in terms of their work as their work ethic and talent takes them. And I know how hard I work because I have never taken the easy way when it comes to doing the things that I do. I've always put in the extra hours and put in the extra time. And right now what I'm interested in doing is building something artistically that I can own, in the sense of take full responsibility for and move it where it needs to go. That's starting to come together okay. There we go. And so that's the big thing that I'm working on right now, is trying to put this stuff together so that I can create a book that is going to be inspiring to that audience. So we'll see. I hope they'll dig it. Boy, it's got to be Saturday Siren time. But I hope it's great where you guys are. Hopefully you're having good weather. And again, my name is Shanth Enjeti, and this is Shanth Enjeti Art. So if you feel like drawing comics and you feel like making some artwork, get out your brush, get out your pen. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let's get this thing cracking. Oh, I got a message. Let me see if I can get it. There we go. They're coming to get you. Yeah, well, there's no doubt about that. There's no doubt they're coming to get me. That is inevitably where it comes to. I swear, wherever I go, what's the one common factor? It must be the sirens. It must be me. There we go. But you know what they say, no gouache, no glory, right? Okay, so I've got that coming together and that figure coming together. And so usually this is the time period when I'm working where this is a little bit of a strange way for me to work, because I don't have as much space in the camera, so I'm trying to work in such a way to where people can see it. But typically what I'll do is I'll go in and work with the inks a little bit more, but I think I'm going to work into the bricks on this. Let me move this over here. And there we go. That's a little bit easier. Okay, cool. So now I can actually see where the bricks are. So let me tilt this over. There we go. And so now it's time for some fun with the bricks. Fun with bricks. And so, yeah, you can see right here that this character and this creature is coming out of the ground. And that's the thing for me is that whenever I'm doing this work, whenever I'm illustrating, I'm trying to think about how... Again, another little wise bit of wisdom that I got from Todd McFarlane was, he goes, everybody's working on their figures, everybody's working on their characters, and he goes, I was paying attention to the windows and the bricks and the things in the background. Now, granted, Todd could definitely say different things, different interviews, depending on, what the point was he was trying to make, and one of the things we love about him. But for me, I always remembered that and thought, and I hated doing backgrounds. But it's a major part of it, is to give that sort of immaculate reality sense to it. And so if I can get a little bit of extra texture in there as I rough these things in, I think it makes a big difference in terms of the readability. I think about things like, I watched this YouTube channel called Resort TV 1, and they do a lot of streams of Disney World, the Magic Kingdom. They're huge, huge fans. And I love, since I was a kid, I've loved theme parks, and I love theme park design. And you can just really see the attention to detail in the people who make theme park design and virtual sort of fantasy environments. And so, yeah, that's a huge, huge influence. Whenever I'm painting bricks, I just remember looking at things, or stone. I remember looking at that design work when I was a kid and just feeling so transported. Like, I wanted to know how they did everything. And I think that's why environment design is really important to me. And I don't mean like designing environments, although there's, obviously there's something to be said for that when I'm working on this right now. But it's more about, let me see if I can move this camera a little bit more. How would I do this? There we go. And I can move this, oh, that's a lot less of a strain on my hand here. And then let me see here. There we go. But one of the things for me about this stuff is creating an environment where you kind of can fall into it. And when I'm in a theme park or when I'm, in any kind of virtual environment, I don't want to be too aware of the outside world. And so I'm always trying to, get those little notes in there, those little marks that are going to make this thing hold together just a little bit more. There we go. There we go. But it's interesting. I've been watching a lot of the work, or a lot of the videos that those folks are doing, and they got these new 4K cameras that they're using, or this 4K camera, and then, they found, I guess, a better, see if I can get that to work, a better way to stream so that it's not getting clogged up on everybody else's cell phone towers. And it's amazing how much of the detail you can see. Now, what you're seeing right there pumps up the contrast a little bit, but that's the thing about it, is when you look at the piece, at a distance, when it's all together, it's not going to be a huge part of it, but it's just going to be something that I subtly kind of knock back. So it's your classic kind of rescue scene down shot. And that's kind of what's governing everything right now. There we go. Just get a little bit of texture down in there. And I'm just going to knock some of that back just a little bit, because I don't need all of it to be that contrasty. And there you go. Then you start to get that kind of distance happening, which is what we really need to have happen. All right. Let me see here. So I've got this, and let me see what I have here. I've got a mixed media pad. Then I've got another piece of paper. So this is going to be for my next page that I'm working on. And then let's see what else we've got here. All right. Ugh. There we go. Get in a better position. Make the necessary old man noises, and then get cracking from there. So yeah, I mean, one of the big things for me is I kind of look at the landscape of what's going on with artwork right now. Is I'm just interested in where the cool stuff is being done, where the interesting stuff is being done. And I see a ton of interesting stuff happening in comics, and it's such a relief, I've been saying since I went off to college in 1994, oh Lord, I've been saying, comics is bound to bounce back soon, the industry's bound to get better soon. And it has been in a death spiral for my entire adult life. And it's pretty rough. It's pretty rough to watch. And I heard Dan Fraga the other day talking about how the Image Comics guys, how being on the inside of it felt a little bit like being a hair band when grunge rock hit, which I thought was kind of interesting. I've heard a lot of people make that comparison. And I think that it was just one of those things to where the industry was going through a big change that we're just now getting to the other side of, which is we need more autonomy from creators, but there wasn't the infrastructure yet. There wasn't crowdfunding. The internet wasn't really there. So even though a lot of independent comic companies came along, they were still essentially smaller, newer versions of, what the big two were doing. And now that we're in this whole crowdfunding period, you really can start your own thing, start your own brand, choose who and how you want to affiliate with people based on, mutual interests and shared goals. And it's just so much, like the difference between now and the slog of going to comic conventions and trying to hope you catch somebody's eyeballs who's going to remember to order your book. It just, as a nobody, in my case in particular, I remember that very clearly. I mean, it feels so completely hopeless. And when you can, if you do good work and you can put your work out there and you're consistent, that's a very tough thing to prove to people in a 5 minute window, in a 10 minute window. And so, what's been kind of interesting to me is, you really can't, like, all this knowledge and all these things I'm passionate about, they haven't really gone away, and the I should say that they haven't gone away. There's a huge part of me. What's been sort of funny is I had more or less thought, well, what am I ever going to do with this? What am I going to do with my passion for comics and my knowledge? And what kind of makes me laugh a little bit is, all of these details that those of us who have really researched the stuff and are really passionate about it know. I'm finally finding people who know what I'm talking about, which is really cool. So, it's a fun time to be making artwork, and it's a fun time to be, doing new stuff. And I think that's really important, particularly when you get, to a certain age. I mean, I definitely, I remember when I look back on things, I've been, I got married when I was 23, had my two kids when I was 29, and they're now 15 years old. I mean, it's crazy to think about, but I've been teaching and, in a job where I've had a lot of responsibility in terms of, for curriculum and all these other kinds of things since I was, how old? Since I was 27. And, it's great. I mean, I cannot say enough how amazing that is, in a sense, to look back. I'm very proud of everything that I've accomplished and, everything that I've done. And I think that kind of mentality and that kind of consistency with work is something that a couple of years ago, when I started crowdfunding my own art books, just solo with no other, support system other than myself, my talent, and putting stuff out there, it was a huge shock to kind of see that kind of discipline that I've always had translated directly into my art in a way that it hadn't done previously. Because basically any part of the job that you can't find someone to do for you, if you know how to do it yourself, nothing slows you down. And if you're not allowed to do it yourself, because it's just the way it is, the way of the world, it's really, it's a frustrating thing. So what's probably frustrating to a lot of people when they're working, which is finding someone to do that job that they don't want to do, is less of a problem, because I see myself as it's my responsibility to do whatever job needs to get done to make things happen. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a real blessing to kind of have, that mentality in a time like the one we're in right now. Because you kind of say to yourself, all right, I got to do the colors. I don't even think about those terms. I have to talk to the printer. I have to figure out shipping. I have to figure out all that stuff. But, it's a blast. There we go. That's starting to come together. Now that perspective is a little bit wonky, but that's okay. When I'm doing this stuff by hand, I'll always go in and, kind of eyeballing it. I'll always go in and sort of correct it a little bit later. But this is one of those instances. Plus, I'm usually rotating the paper a little bit more, but you get the idea. There we go. So now I'm just kind of roughing in the texture that I'm going to need there. I was looking at an artist by the name of Kelsey Shannon, and who else? Dan Fraga was talking about some of the amazing comic book artists that come out of the Philippines. And I mean, just some beautiful Conan work I was looking at the other day, and some great cross-hatching stuff. I mean, there are so many cool people on the internet who are just really knowledgeable in their area. And if you're that kind of person to where you really enjoy that and you really appreciate that, it's great to really have it around. And it's something I was missing for a long time. I mean, I was saying to my wife, before I met my friend Michael, on YouTube, that I just want to sit around and be able to have conversations with more people who shared my interests. And, when you're on the road a it working crazy hours and, it's or I should say the hours aren't that crazy. Well, actually they are pretty crazy. But when you're working a lot of hours, doing various things, you don't get. It demands a lot of you in terms of your drive and in terms of your focus, and you want to make sure that you're around. If you need to be around people who are interested in particular things that you are, as a part of just conversation. It's something that you start to feel a little bit. Now, it's hard to have a conversation, when you're at a job, obviously, and you're working, crazy hours. But what I've found is, let's see if I can get this to work here. What I've found is that I was able to meet people during that time because I was able to, find them on YouTube, funny enough. And then you reach out to people and you're like, oh, yeah, okay, there you are. Because, the cool thing about any situation that isn't, where you get a broader group of people, where it's not limited in terms of who it appeals to everybody, is that you get to meet more people with different opinions and different views on things that, when I say different, I don't mean different than mine. Excuse me. I mean, people who, if you don't meet people in your regular circle who have similar interests, you can meet them online a lot easier. So that's been kind of nice about it. So I finally met the people who are thinking about comics and doing comics and making work the way I naturally think to do. And so their concerns and their conversations are about things like paper costs, shipping costs, distribution, all these things that I've been dying to talk to somebody about, and how to actually make your own stuff. So when I was in school, one of the things that I used to tell my friends all the time was, we got to get out. Like, I always wanted to get things started. Let's get out. Let's get something done. Let's make things happen. It was a huge part of me. And at a certain point, no matter how much you have that, your life gives way to, the various responsibilities and obligations that you have, which are great. That's a huge part of life. But it's you have to temper that at a certain point to where when opportunities start to arise, and when, they say that, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. I've been preparing my skill set my entire life to get to the point to where I was able to make those 2 art books. People were able to look at my work and go, oh, wow, you're able to do all this? That was a huge part of my process. And so when I'm looking at the stuff that I'm doing right now as an artist, it's like, I didn't see this coming even a year or 2 ago. Well, maybe I did 2 years ago. I didn't see something like this happening 5 or 6 years ago. I didn't think about Indiegogo certainly 20 years ago, or when I was a kid, doing my work. But I was gaining the skills I needed to be able to self-publish a comic. The first thing I ever did as an artist when I was 14 was to self-publish a comic book about a masked vigilante character. Sure, it was very, very basic, very simple, but it was certainly nothing like what I'm doing right now. If we're being real about it, when I was 14 years old, I wasn't illustrating stuff like this. I did not have that skill set, for the scope, for the detailing. I didn't have any of that stuff, any of that ability there. So all of this stuff has come over time, and I couldn't have created this almost animated, film, like reality for characters to inhabit, for stone staircases and sorcery and fantasy weaponry and giant vampire bat creatures. None of this stuff was possible during that time. None of it was. And it's only through the time period that we're in right now that I'm able to kind of dream and imagine as big as I want to imagine. Having tiny figures down here in this frame with a giant demon at their door. I have been painting and drawing and working and self-publishing books and doing all this stuff. And it almost sort of just felt like, I sat down and with my wife, I think it was this past summer, and I said to her, I go, we just sort of need to sit down and pray and think about like where, and it's a pretty powerful thing, when you're having these conversations with your wife, bless her heart. And I said, but I want some guidance on what I'm going to do next and where I'm going to go next. and I just want to have some peace of mind on what to do, because I feel like things are changing. I feel very torn. I feel about what I want to do and where I want to go next. And, basically, it was similar to what I did, before I proposed to my wife. I mean, it was that kind of moment. It was a big deal. And I think that my mind sort of cleared out. It doesn't mean I think, oh, well, I've got everything figured out. Not at all. But my mind cleared out, and I knew what I had to do with my work. And I basically said, I'm going to move towards this direction. And then I'm going to see if there are any, if there's anything I start to notice that further says to me, all right, this is the direction you're supposed to be moving in. And I'm very happy to say that I felt confident enough that that a lot of people in, the CG community started, being very encouraging, very supportive. I got a really great, commission work, which was really affirming, and and I just started to meet artists who were talking about things like perspective and backgrounds and cars and making things cool, and seemed to be having a good time. And I just thought, all right, I guess this is what I'm supposed to be doing, or at least this is where the direction I should be going in. So that's going to be what I do going forward. That's where all of this stuff is going. It's having fun with illustrating people's characters, for that matter, who are having fun. And so I guess what we'll do is I'm going to close out with, because I've done my share of guerrilla artwork in my art books. If anybody's following those will be available when I do my crowdfunding for the comic book, which is coming up soon. So anybody who missed books 1 and 2, they are going to be available. They'll be a little bit more expensive because, again, they're not seeing a second print, so these are first prints. But those books will be available. But this is something I'm known for, is painting my gorillas. So this is not my gorilla. This is Dan Fraga's gorilla from the comic book Black Flag. So we'll close out on this. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll show you guys my new closing, which I'm pretty happy with. Hopefully this will work. We'll see where it goes. So again, this is Shanth Enjeti. This is Shanth Enjeti Art, and do stay tuned. Like, subscribe. I will be launching an Indiegogo comic very, very soon. And, yeah. Hi to CG, and peace to everybody. Here you go.
King Kong ain't got nothing on me!